Hi, Kinders. Today we're going to be looking at a book about President Lincoln. Back during President's Day, we learned about presidents and what they do, and we learned that President Lincoln was a really important president. Today we're going to dive a little bit deeper into all about him. I chose this book because it's about a little girl who also wants to find more about President Lincoln and the information. And she is a really good reader. You'll find out. She asks a lot of questions, and good readers ask questions. All right, here we go. Looking at Lincoln by Mara Coleman. Looking at Lincoln. One day, while walking through the park on my way to breakfast, I saw a very tall man, and he reminded me of someone, but I could not think who. Who does that look like? At the coffee shop, I ordered pancakes. They were delicious. We paid with a Lincoln and 2 Washingtons. And then I remembered the man I had seen looked exactly like Abraham Lincoln. There's a little girl. She's at the library. She's looking at a book about Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln, the 16th President of the United States. Look at her first question she asked. Who was he? I went to the library to find out. Abraham Lincoln was such an amazing man that there are over 16,000 books written about him. I wanted to read them all, but I got lost in the photos of his unusual face. I stared at one. I could look at him forever. Ooh, look closely. What is that boy doing at the library? He was born in a small log cabin in Kentucky on February 12, 1809. The family was poor. Abe was a dreamer, and he did not like to do chores, but he loved to read. He was lucky. His stepmother loved him like crazy, and he adored her. She looked so stern, but she let him dream and read as much as he wanted. He went to school for only 1 year, but he was curious and taught himself many things. They had hardly any supplies and, of course, no electricity. Abraham spent many hours reading by the fire's glow. One day, he was kicked in the head by a mule. He slept for 2 days, and then he woke up and grew up and decided to be a lawyer. He did like to argue. And he lived in Springfield, Illinois, and got a reputation as a smart and honest man. They called him Honest Abe. He had a family that he loved very much. His wife, Mary, who was very short, and 4 sons. They laughed and had lots of friends and even ran a little wild. Now look, she's wondering. Remember, that's one of our power words. I wonder if Mary and Abraham had nicknames for each other. Like, she called him Linky? Did he call her Little Plumpy? Maybe. Abe worked hard and became interested in the government, and he decided he would run for president. On March 4th, 1861, he was inaugurated President of the United States. There's his 4 sons, and there's his wife, Mary. Oh, look, and a dog. On the day he was elected, I bet Mary made his favorite vanilla cake, but maybe he forgot to eat his slice. He was often too busy thinking to eat. Lincoln wore a very tall hat. With his hat on, he was 7 feet tall. He wrote many notes and stuffed them inside his hat. What was he thinking about? She's asked that question. He was thinking about democracy. Ooh, that's a social studies word. the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution created by the founders of this country. He was thinking about freedom and doing good for mankind. And maybe he was also thinking about getting a birthday present for his little son. Maybe a whistle or pickup sticks. Can you imagine getting a birthday gift of a whistle? How would you feel about getting a whistle for your birthday? What did he love? He loved his dog Fido. I think Fido was cross-eyed. He loved apples, Cox orange pippins, white pippins, wine sap, Benoni. I don't even know if I'm reading that right. But I'm wondering as a teacher, what are all those foods? We'll have to look and investigate further. He always had an apple on his desk. He loved music. He loved Mozart, especially his opera, The Magic Flute. But mostly he loved people. His family, of course, but all people. He wanted them to live well. He loved justice and truth. And the country was in trouble and headed for a war. After hundreds of years of slavery, people were saying enough. There were courageous people who fought for liberty, like Jean Truth, and Frederick Douglass, who had been a slave until he ran away to the North. Both of them met with Lincoln and spoke of the plight of slaves. So Mrs. Gillie's going to explain this a little bit. Half of the country was saying, it's not fair to own slaves. It's not fair to tell people what to do and make them do things. And the other half of the country had an opinion that it was fair. And so the country wanted to divide. They wanted to say, you know what, fine, you have your opinion and you go not own slaves. And you have an opinion and you go and you can own slaves. But President Lincoln said, no, we're one country and we need to not let our opinions tell us that we can't be together. Lincoln hated slavery and wrote to a friend, if slavery is not wrong, nothing is wrong. During his presidency, he issued the Emancipation Proclamation, the first official step toward freeing millions of slaves. So President Lincoln said, you know what? Your opinion on owning slaves is just not right. It was a difficult time to be president. The southern states, the Confederacy, wanted their own country where slavery was allowed, and Lincoln said, no, we must stay one country. The northern states, the Union, believed that slavery should be abolished, and so they went to war. In a museum, I saw a uniform of one of the first soldiers killed in the Civil War. Here is a bullet hole at the point of his heart where there were 14 brass buttons on the front of his tunic, and one was shot away. "13 brass buttons remain. The soldier's name was Elmer Ephraim Ellsworth. Terrible things happen in a war." The Civil War ground on, and Lincoln went to Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, the site of the big battle. Thousands of soldiers were buried there, and many were just a number on their grave. On that sad land, Lincoln gave one of his history's greatest speeches, the Gettysburg Address. It was short, only 272 words, ending with, "Government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth." The war finally ended in 1865, and almost 1 million people had been killed or wounded, and the North had won. The people had suffered greatly, but now it was time to rejoice and start to rebuild the country, with Lincoln leading the way. Victory! We shall not own slaves. I wish it was that easy. But it was not to be. After the agony of the war, Lincoln wanted to lighten the mood, and he took his wife to see a funny play. And during the play, he was shot, murdered by a wretched man who did not want slavery to end. And Lincoln had been rocking in his chair, and people carried him across the street to the home of a friend. And he died the next morning, April 15th, 1865. He was 56 years old. Difference of opinions can really hurt people. The news spread, and people across the land wept with grief for their fallen leader. But a great man is never really gone. Abraham Lincoln will live forever, and if you go to Washington, D.C. in the spring, you can walk through the cherry blossoms and visit him. At his memorial, you can read the words he wrote near the end of the war. With malice toward none, with charity for all. And you can look into his beautiful eyes. Just look. And so, did you say that book, would you say that book was an informational text, a book that teaches about a topic? Do you see? Look close. Who did we learn about? That's right, a person. We learned about President Lincoln.